All right, welcome everyone to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Lobby here with Tim Bielik, with Lance Reisland, and it is a week away now as we're recording this on Thursday. The NFL draft coming up. We heard from Andrew Berry earlier this morning. He held his pre-draft press conference, and then we are going to look ahead to that draft. We're going to do a mock draft today. We're going to look at D lineman. That's the position we're looking at today specifically. And I'm going to have everybody just sort of pound the table, make that final case for like, this is the guy that I need the Cleveland Browns to take. This is the guy I need them to consider. And one other thing we're going to do is we're going to just throw out some names of guys that in future drafts, you're sitting here watching these games, watching these guys, and somebody else stands out to you, and you go and look at a roster, and it's like, okay, this guy's a freshman, this guy's a sophomore. This is obviously like everybody knows about Jeremiah Smith and some of these other guys, but who are some guys who maybe stood out to you that we might be talking about when we come back and do this again next year? So, Tim and Lance, I am excited to get going, and I sent you guys a rundown. It was nice and organized. And I've got to be honest right now at this point, I just want to give Lance the floor because, Tim, you know this very well. Lance has got a take. And I think it's an interesting take. And one of the things I like about Lance and I like about talking draft with Lance is he does not fall into groupthink at all. He does his own thing. He watches the tape. He comes up with the guys he likes, and sometimes he lands on somebody. And Lance, as we're talking defensive lineman, obviously, at number 2, it seems like Travis Hunter's going to be the pick as we're recording this here on Thursday. We've had the Shedeur Sanders discussion. I had framed this when we first started as, well, I think we'll make this like an Abdul Carter conversation. You have a different way that you want the Browns to go at number 2 overall. If you were in charge, this is the guy you would pick. So the floor is yours. Make your case. Who's the guy that you want the Cleveland Browns, or if you were in charge, you would take at number 2?
Well, if it comes down to Abdul Carter and Mason Graham for me is the guy. And here's why. When you look at defensive tackles as an offense coordinator, defensive tackles who are elite in terms of their movement skills are so hard to block. And there are very few guys who, for me, fit kind of the category that Mason Graham enters in terms of his ability to move. He's a 3-down guy, right? So he's a guy at 320 pounds. He can anchor in there on first and second down, which I think the Browns need. They need a guy who is bigger. When they lost Dalvin Thompson, that's a huge loss for me. And I've told people that people aren't very big on the loss of Dalvin Thompson. But what Dalvin did was very boring. And what Mason Graham can give you is he can give you what Dalvin gave you, but he can also give you pass rush on third down. He can also jump in that gap. So you can go a 3-down line, you can put him on the center, and he can 2-gap. You can put him in the B gap, and he can just blow that gap. At 320 pounds, he has elite movement skills. Now, the reason I'm a little bit biased because as a coach, I absolutely loved coaching wrestlers. And when you read about Mason Graham, he's a state champ wrestler. So those guys have elite balance, they have elite hand skills, and more than anything else, if you're a wrestler, they are the toughest humans on the planet, those wrestlers. So for me, now going why I would take him over Abdul Carter, because Abdul Carter is 251 pounds. And I have not been as high on Abdul Carter as other. And here's why. Abdul Carter's when first of all, people are going to run right at him. And if you've ever seen Abdul Carter work out, he is a muscle bound guy. He's a muscle bound freak. And I don't know how much room he has for growth. So is he a guy who's only going to come in on third downs and rush the passer, which he will be outstanding at? Don't get me wrong. He's going to be elite at. But do you spend the second pick in the draft on a guy who's just going to be a pass rush specialist? Now, we'll tell you as an offense coordinator, if I'm going against Hunter, I'm throwing away from him. If I'm going against Abdul Carter, I'm running right at him at 251 pounds. And I'm going to try to tire him out. And when we pass the ball, I'm going to chip him. I'm going to chip him with big guys to kind of I'm going to make his life miserable over and over and over again. And he doesn't have the Myles Garrett where he's 280 and he can kind of run through those chips. He's 250 pounds, so those are going to affect him. Now, when you watch Mason Graham, his hands, his ability to rush the passer, he's as good as anybody in the draft, in the last couple drafts, in my opinion, to play it first and second down. I'm going to anchor in there. I'm taking on doubles. You can't zone block me. You can't down block me. You can't gap block me. And then on third down, I'm going to jump in a gap and I'm going to power rush you at 320 pounds and I have better feet than the guards. All I know is that the film I watched, he's my number one guy in terms of guys that would be hard to. That's kind of how I watch the film. I kind of go, who's the hardest guy to plan for? For me right now, even though Hunter's awesome, even though Abdul Carter's awesome, and they are both willing of what the pick they get, the guy that's hardest to block and the guy that's hardest to game plan for me, without question, it's not even close, is Mason Graham.
Okay, there we go. Lance making that case there, Tim. So, again, it's one of the things I love about doing these pods. We all come at it from different angles, and like I said, Lance is not Lance is going to be Lance, man. He's not going to fall into that group thinking. If he loves a guy, you're going to know about it. Mason Graham was one of the kind of hot names early, and it's kind of fallen off. He's still obviously one of the top prospects in this draft, but you just don't hear his name a whole lot. So what would you say to Lance?
Well, I think the reason he's probably not as associated with it is just, I mean, defensive tackle obviously is, unfortunately for Mason Graham, not a premium position, and there's really nothing, for lack of a better term, sexy about Graham's game. I do agree with Lance. I mean, if you're looking for as disruptive of players you're going to find in this draft, Mason Graham is that guy. I mean, ask Ohio State. Like, Michigan doesn't win that game in 2024 without Mason Graham playing as amazingly as he did. I mean, he was just sensational against that Ohio State run, that offense, although Ohio State basically helped them by trying to slam the ball into the middle of that line over and over and over again, and it just didn't work. But I think as much as I would still, if I was going to take Mason Graham, I'd try and see if I can get that fourth pick from New England and be like, you guys want Travis Hunter? Give us give us 2, 3, and next year's 2, and maybe a 4 next year, and Travis Hunter's yours, and then get Graham at 4. I just think with Abdul Carter, the size isn't as big a concern for me as far as a fit for this offense, because the Brown scheme, because Jim Schwartz kind of has that wide 9 style. And I think you can get away with smaller edge rushers like Abdul Carter, about 250 plus pounds. The injury history doesn't concern me that much. I don't like the idea of using that second pick on essentially doubling down on something you already have. Like, you already have a franchise pass rusher, and people are just throw out the Eagles comparison. And I don't buy that, because as good as the Eagles defensive line was, we also have to remember they had the best offensive line in football. They had A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts was Super Bowl MVP. Takes more than a great pass rush to be great now. I will say for Mason Graham, it is harder to find those impact defensive tackles than it is to find those impact pass rushers. I mean, it feels like there's an Abdul Carter every other year in the draft. I mean, 3 years ago, I think we had Trayvon Walker, Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau all go in the top 5. Mason Graham is in a tier that we rarely see a defensive tackles. The only one I can think of off the top of my head that came into a draft more highly regarded than Mason Graham is Jalen Carter, who in 2023 was probably my number 1 non-quarterback, if I remember correctly. So defensive tackle, it's not a premium position, but if you have a dude there who is just disruptive on all 3 downs, I mean, it goes to the Aaron Donald example. Aaron Donald was arguably the best defensive tackle the game has ever seen. If you're an elite player at a non-premium position, you could still be elite and have impact. So I think Mason Graham's going to be really good. I just would try, if I was going to do that, that'd be a slight trade down if I can get New England or Jacksonville to swap spots and give me a bunch to pretty much take Travis Hunter. Although I would still take Hunter, honestly.
Yeah, I do want to add, and we'll get into kind of some other guys that might be a little more realistic for the Browns, some day 2, day 3 guys, as we go through our favorites here. But going to the Abdul Carter size thing, and we do have a comment about him here in our chat from BK Brown. Says Carter can play linebacker first and second down, pass rusher on third down, use him like Chiefs great Derek Thomas. I do think, like, all the talk about the size, and there's some other guys too that we might talk about here that maybe aren't the ideal size for what we view as like a Jim Schwartz edge rusher. I'm kind of the mind that if a guy is really talented, if a guy is as talented as Abdul Carter or some of these other guys, like, if you're a defensive coordinator in 2025, you got to figure out a way to use it. Like, there shouldn't be a restriction on he's got to weigh this much, or he's got to be this tall, or have these arms. Or if a guy is legitimately that good and you're a defensive coordinator in 2025 in the NFL, you got to be able to figure it out. So even if Abdul Carter maybe is a little smaller than what a Jim Schwartz edge rusher would be, you have to figure it out. But Lance, I do think the run part of it is interesting, because it's not that Myles Garrett is a bad run defender. It's just the teams tend to use his aggression against him sometimes. They'll kind of let him get in the backfield and kind of run through that gap it creates. And sometimes they use that against him. And it did help a few years ago. Obviously, it went off the rails, but it helped a few years ago when they had a guy like Jadeveon Clowney anchoring on that other side against the run. So I do think there is an argument to be made that maybe to complement Myles Garrett, you do want a more stout run defender on the end. That's obviously, Mason Graham is an interior guy, but if we're talking edge rushers, maybe a more stout run defender on that other side.
Well, the thing about a defensive lineman is that, I completely agree with everything you're saying. So both of you guys, awesome points. But my thing as an offense coordinator, and obviously I didn't coach at the level these guys coach at, but we're all kind of in the same boat in terms of we got to find ways to block people. We got to find ways to get our best players the ball. And all I know is when you have a Myles Garrett, if you have a Abdul Carter, doesn't mean you can do it, but you can create a plan for him. Now, there's many a times that I'll never forget Thaddeus Gibson from Ohio State. I had a great plan for him. Couldn't block him. Didn't matter if I put 2 or 3 out there, but I did have a plan for him. The thing about a defensive tackle is it's hard to even create a plan for him because you have to change how you block things. You have to change your double teams. So all of a sudden, if he's at the 3 technique, you can't leave the double team to get to the second level and to get to the backer. So that backer is going to run free. So all of a sudden, if JOK is healthy, he's now running free. If it's Hunter, if he's that elite, then you throw away from him. You put guys in the slot, you get away from him. Once again, it doesn't mean it's going to work, but as a defensive, I will just say, as when a defensive tackle like the Aaron Donalds, and once again, I don't know if any guys can be compared to Aaron Donald, but when you talk about guys who are disruptive and guys who get in the gap, those guys are really hard to game plan for because those guards, first of all, don't move well laterally, usually as well as the tackles. And you're counting on those double teams on zone. You're counting on the double teams on gap scheme. As much as everybody talks a gap scheme, zone scheme, a lot of it is we're going to double that 3 technique. We're going to double the 2-eye. Those guys make it impossible to leave to get to the second level. And as good as Abdul Carter is, and he is legit in terms of what he does. I just, if you're going to play devil's advocate, how much bigger can you get? I don't know if you guys seen how that guy work out, but he's the muscle hamster, right? He is absolutely jacked. I don't know how much more weight he can put on. Now, you're right, Dan, in terms of you got to find ways to make put him at, get him off the ball, put him at backer, make him rush over center. There's a bunch of things you can do. But in terms of if as an offense coordinator, there's no one harder to block than a 3-down defensive tackle who can move. It's the hardest thing to do as an offense coordinator is to block that guy who can move. And then, you run power at him. He can anchor in there. He's 320 pounds. I think he's a unicorn. I think he's a great player. He's my guy. And I know I've been texting you guys for 2 weeks in terms of I'm making the argument. That's all I got for you. He's my guy. And I go with him because he can play 3 downs. He can anchor in there. He's nasty. He's a wrestler. He brings an attitude to the defense. I think he's a guy, and I agree with what Tim said. Maybe you trade down a little bit because a defensive tackle is not sexy, but I don't care about that. Dan, you know me. I don't care about any of those. What everybody says. I like guys who play football, and Mason Graham is a football player, and I think he's a guy who's going to be a great pro.
All right, let's get moving here on the rest of this stuff. Let's shift over to defensive ends. We're going to talk about defensive tackles a little bit later, but let's get through some of the defensive linemen that we like. Tim, you're first up. Give us your first name.
Well, what I looked for when I picked out a couple guys, I wanted to prioritize guys who may be a little smaller, kind of going with the idea I had where, you don't necessarily need size in the Jim Schwartz wide 9 if you're looking for designated pass rushers, because they already have guys with decent size like Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire. But what they also prioritize, clearly, when you look at some of their drafting history recently, they prioritize those high-end pass rush win rates. Like Alex Wright, when he got drafted, he had a win rate of about 23.8%. Isaiah McGuire, pretty good as well, 17.6. So with that in mind, first guy I'm going to talk about, Princely Umanmielen from Ole Miss, 6'4", 244. I see Lance nodding his head right there. I take it you're a big Umanmielen guy. So,
yeah, absolutely. Long, athletic, awesome player.
Yeah, it's kind of what I was about to say. 22.8% win rate, better than what Abdul Carter had, 22.5%. Now, Uman Mielen is kind of more finesse than power, but Lance kind of hit it right on the head. Long arms. I think he has just enough power, but speed, length, he could just be a menace on the edge just by outrunning people. And he's even got a really good spin move that seems like he's incorporating there. And that length allows him to really disengage from blocks and get after the quarterback. And for edge rusher in particular, we're going to talk. Maybe we have time. I'll mention a guy that I think is maybe getting talked about too much as a high first round pick. Where edge rusher, I think, is a position where you need to have productivity. And Uman Mielen, for the last 3 seasons, 22 and 23 in Florida, and then 2024 Ole Miss, he led his team in sacks in all 3 seasons. So there's productivity right there with Uman Mielen. I think at this stage of his career, maybe more designated pass rusher. But I think if you're looking for someone, to be that juice off the edge to complement the power you have with Garrett, Wright, and McGuire, I think you can inject some speed there with Uman Mielen. And again, going back to the Eagles comparison, kind of what they have with Nolan Smith and Nolan Smith off the edge and a little bit what Josh Sweat can be. So I think that kind of combination what the Eagles had shows you can win with speed off the edge. And I think they could use a quick speed component.
Yeah, go watch the Georgia game if you want to see some good stuff from him. That Ole Miss defensive line just made life hell on Carson Beck and Georgia in that game. So when we talk about edge rushers and we talk about guys who could end up with the Browns, arm length is something to keep in mind. They have generally drafted longer guys. This was another note that I had too. He hasn't drafted a bunch of edge rushers, but 2 of them, Isaiah McGuire and Thomas, they had relative athletic scores of over 9. So this relative athletic score site, Tim, I know you know about that. It kind of takes all the testing numbers and puts them all in one place and gives you a grade on the guy. So somebody at that 9 number is worth keeping an eye on. And we're looking at an 8.99 here. So almost right there. And Lance, you audibly agreed with this assessment by Tim.
Well, well, first of all, I love to hear you guys' numbers. It's always, you guys are much smarter than me in terms of like the numbers and how it works. I just watched the film, but that makes sense to me because length makes you hard to block, right? So if you can extend that offensive lineman, which Princely does well in terms of, I can now dictate what you're doing as the tight end or the tackle. So those guys with length, and the Browns have kind of a model, right? Alex Wright, McGuire, these guys, they have this length, they have this arm length, they have this. There's a lot of things that go into that, which is why this podcast with us is so good. Because for me, I just watch the film and try to say, this guy makes plays. And when you talk about, all the guys at Ole Miss, but that guy, his length, his ability to extend the tackle is what I like. And if you watch him on film, he is able to extend that tackle with his long arms and see what's going on better than most this year in the draft. So I could see why Tim likes him, and it's a very good choice in terms of, there's a lot of really good guys like him, but his length really, when I watch him on film, that's what I have in my notes on him, is his length is very impressive.
Yeah, and just to clarify for one of our commenters who's talking about Uman Mielen as a 3rd rounder rated per our lads, it generally has been in the 2nd or 3rd round, depending where you look. We're not just talking about guys at number 2 here. We're going to talk a lot. The guys we're throwing out there are guys that we kind of view as, could you get this guy day 2, day 3, assuming the Browns take a Travis Hunter or maybe a quarterback. I don't know. It seems like it's going to be Hunter, but a Travis Hunter, a Mason Graham. Lance, maybe they listen to the podcast and take Mason Graham, some edge rushers that they could look at and maybe have a shot to get in the 2nd or 3rd round. So Lance, why don't you throw out our next name?
My guy's Mike Green out of Marshall. And what I like about Mike Green is that, going with Tim said, is I'm a big production guy. And the thing I've learned from you guys and things I've learned about being down at Browns practice is, I've been involved in football for 40 plus years, in especially in terms of like as a coordinator and trying to figure out how to do things. And there's a certain size you got to be. Those things are important, but production is very important. So that balance of like, what could a guy be and what production does the guy give you is very important. And that's a tough one. That's what GMs really struggle with, in my opinion. But for me, I kind of lean more to, if they're close in the measurements, I like guys who are productive. And Mike Green, 17 sacks last year, led the country, 23 tackles for a loss. But when you watch him on film, he's so violent And I'm a big believer in those defensive linemen being violent with their hands, violent with that first step, and violent with their intentions when they get off the football. And there is no one more violent than Mike Green in terms of getting off as a pass rusher off the edge. Now, the weight is something I want to see. He's been, measured from anywhere from 220 to 248. Once again, I don't really care about that because when you watch him on film, his ability to get into people and create leverage. He does a great job of, for example, bull rushing and then switching to a one arm and kind of creating that leverage by getting low. So he's a guy who understands leverage, he understands balance, and he plays angry. And I always like guys who play angry when they arrive at the football. They're angry. Mike Green for me is a guy when you watch him against Ohio State, just a great spin move a number of times. He bends very well. He's the first guy in the draft I've seen a couple years who I don't want. No one bends like Myles Garrett, but in terms of like what you're looking for in bend, Mike, Mike he can bend around the corner. So I like his production. I like his angriness, and that's the guy I would go. Now, obviously, I think he's a second round guy. Maybe you have to trade it back in. I know a lot of people like him, um, but he's kind of all over the board as well because of his size and where he played, and et cetera. But I love him. I think he's aggressive, and I think he'd be a great fit in the short scheme.
Tim, I know you just put the finishing touches on a 7-round mock. Did he make it out of the first round for you?
Well, I mean, it was a 7-round Browns mock, but for me, I look back at my last first round mock. I had him actually 17 to the Bengals, and I'm looking at his numbers. 17 sacks, 23 tackles for loss. I mean, that's special productivity. And this is a guy who has been kind of rising throughout the process. He was great in the Senior Bowl, and he's just absolutely carried the momentum forward. He feels like a guy who, just going to be one of those guys that, even though he's a smaller edge rusher, is just going to be a pain to deal with because of the things Lance was talking about. And I mean, we always talk about, there's only like, you don't have to go to a big school to be productive. And Mike Green, you can be a monster or Marshall. You're talking about explosiveness, physicality with Green. You could dominate that level. And he played pretty well against Ohio State when Marshall came in there and, pushed that Ohio State team a little bit at the beginning of the season. So for me, he's a first round guy through and through. I'd be stunned if he made it into day number 2.
Okay. Tim, why don't you give us another name?
I'm going to go away with the from the long arm conversation we're having a little bit. So this might be a guy who maybe doesn't get taken by the Browns, but this is another high-end athlete. Ashton Gelati from Louisville, 6'2", 264 pounds, pass rush win rate of 20.9%. And just to make sure I get the relative athletic score, Dan, I looked it up before when I took my notes on him, 9.75 out of 10. So we're talking he has high-end speed and high-end agility. I mean, that 3-cone short shuttle, sensational. Like he's got just tremendous hands. And there's plenty of times when you watch him that he can line up inside. There have been times in his highlight reel where you see him pass rush from the inside, and he just has this motor that just never stops running. I feel like that's something Jim Schwartz loves in guys, is that relentless motor that, he just keeps on going all the way through the whistle. And I think that's Ashton Gelati to a T right there. What's going to hurt him is that, he's got shorter arms. And I think because of that, there's naturally been some comparisons to Adrian Claiborne. And I mean, Claiborne was a pretty solid player throughout his career, never a superstar, but always, a solid professional pass rusher and a solid defensive end throughout his career. And, if you can have a career like Adrian Claiborne, I don't think that's anything to be disappointed about. And as far as the production goes from Gelati, it did tail off in 2024. He had 11 sacks in 2023, down to 4.5 in 2024. So maybe a little trend in the wrong direction. Maybe why he's looking like a late day 2 guy, but a guy who's got some energy and some juice to him as far as athleticism and motor. Those are things I believe Jim Schwartz really enjoys.
Lance, what do you think?
Well, Gelati, the thing that's Tim kind of underrated. You're right, Tim. His hands. So you can play inside if you have great hands. And why is because you can beat that. So if you're inside and you're undersized and you can get your hands on that guard, or you can get your hands on that guard's wrists, or you can do, there's a bunch of different stuff. But he's really good with his hands. Not only are his hands violent, but he places his hands right. If you watch him on film, he does a great job of kind of deciding what the offense is going to do and where am I going to put my hands. And if you watch those guys who are elite inside, if you watch Aaron Donald, those guys, Mason Graham, well, I keep going back to not only the good, but a guy like Gelati, he does a great job of winning with those hands. And if you win with the hands, You win with leverage. Now you're underneath the guy. There's a bunch of different things you can do. So for me, Gelati, when all I have on my notes on him is hands. And that tells me when I went back, when Tim, texted me what he was going to, who guys he likes, that's what it tells me about him. When you have great hands, you can play football as a defensive lineman because you can win. If you get your hands on first, you win. And that's the bottom line. He has a great first step and he wins with his hands. And that gives you a chance. And I like him. I agree with Tim. His upside is very good, not very long. The length measurements don't bother me as much as it bothers others. I like to watch him on film. Gelati's a great guy in film.
So, somebody in the chat asking about the number we keep throwing out, the relative athletic score. Just to clarify what that is. So the website is ras.football, and all it is just a collection of testing numbers for a guy, and then it's grading him based on that. So it's not even really necessarily a grade on the player himself. It's just taking all of the testing numbers, so from the combine, pro days, all of that, putting them into a computer, spits out a number, and that's your relative athletic score grade. So it's not necessarily like, oh, this guy has the best RAS, he's the number one player in the draft. It's more of a collection of testing numbers, which, as we've talked about, that's just part of the equation, is the testing. You got to watch guys, you got to see how they look, you got to see what they think, what you think about them on film. Some guys test great and they get on the field and it doesn't work. Some guys test poorly and they get on the field and they're awesome. So that's what we're talking about when we mention that RAS, just to clarify. So who are we at here? We're at Lance now. Give us your second guy.
It's a guy both me and Tim both like, Josiah Stewart out of Michigan. He played at Coastal Carolina, 6'1", 245. So again, a guy who's very undersized in terms of what you want as an NFL pass rusher. But first thing I like is his pass rush plan. So if you're going to go with high hands, he's gonna forklift you. If you go with low hands, he's gonna double swipe you. So he's got a plan for what you do offensively. Which, two things it tells me: one is he really works at his craft. Two is he watches film, and that's so important in terms of the guy you're going against. Like I used to tell my kids, who are you playing, and what does he like to do? And there's not a lot of guys in the draft like Josiah Stewart. First of all, he's explosive. All the things we talk about, he's explosive. First step. All that kind of stuff is awesome, obviously. But what he does really well, in my opinion, is he understands what the offensive lineman in front of him is trying to do. And there's guys who play high. There's guys who like to play independent handedly, like Joe Thomas like to do. Joe Thomas has kind of brought that into last 10 years, where I'm going to individually punch with a hand. And Josiah Stewart does such a good job of understanding that. The other thing is he plays with a relentless motor. And I like guys who play angry, especially the defensive lineman, right? So he comes in, if he's a pass rush guy. Now, as compared to other guys who are undersized, he anchors pretty well. And why he anchors pretty well is because of his base. So he understands, once again, when you have to anchor. Well, you have to anchor if there's a double team. Well, you don't get double teamed a ton as an end, but you can get base blocked by the tight end. And he does a great job of not getting moved because of his base. So Josiah Stewart, he had 8.5 sacks, bunch of tackles for a loss, was really good at Coastal Carolina, comes to Michigan, very physical, very fast, does all the things you talk about, especially with Jim Schwartz, right? He's a guy, if you needed to, you could stand him up. You could do some different things with him. But as a pass rush guy, wide nine, he'd be very tough to block because of his pass rush plan and because of his prep and what he does before the game starts. So I'm a big Josiah Stewart fan. I think he's an outstanding pass rusher, and more important than anything else, the Browns need some mean guys. I want to go to practice. Dan, you and I have talked about this. I want to go to practice and I want to see guys be irritated. I want to see guys who are irritated about being out there as long as they are. And, you haven't seen that last couple of years. And you and I have talked about that when we're out there. Josiah Stewart will bring an attitude where he will make everybody mad because he plays at 100 miles per hour all the time.
Yeah, I mean that's probably another pod, a whole other pod. But like, I want to see competitions. I want to see, like, we've gone to camp the last few years and it's just felt like so much has been settled. And I want to go there and I want to see Cedric Tillman have to earn that number 2 wide receiver job against, maybe some of the guys they already have there, but then, with Jaden Higgins or some rookie, or obviously Travis Hunter, if they draft him at 2. I want to see Jerome Ford win that running back job. I want to see these edge rushers kind of duke it out across from Myles Garrett. I think that's been lacking over the last few years. Unrelated, Lance, I'm putting this on the screen now. Somebody's a big fan of your Cavs sweatshirt. So there you go. You've got a fan.
Absolutely.
Or your sweatshirt has a fan. Tim, Lance loves these Michigan guys.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Josiah Stewart's profile, 27.7% pass rush win rate. I was a little disappointed I didn't get dibs on him first, but it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about the Browns have power edge rushers. They don't have that explosive speed guy off the edge, and I think even though Josiah Stewart is a smaller guy, 243 pounds, I think because he's shorter, like Lance was talking about, having that base, you can afford to be a little smaller. If you're a little shorter, that's just natural. That's just physics 101. That kind of goes with the idea of smaller defensive tackles, might not be so bad because they can get leverage much more easily. But with Stewart, just that explosiveness off the edge, you add a guy like that, and all of a sudden you can have this kind of creativity on defense where you can really afford more to move either Myles Garrett or Alex Wright or Isaiah McGuire inside on those third downs. You have that explosiveness off the edge. You have that relentless motor guy who's just going to do whatever it takes to get to the quarterback. And I mean, it's not, going back to what you were saying, Dan, earlier about size and stuff like that, I'm not as concerned with size. And I think it's because, like you said, if you're a coach in this day and age, you should be able to adapt to whatever player you can get. It's not round peg, square hole anymore. You got to be able to adapt to just getting really good football players, finding ways to make them successful, and then turning them loose. And I think Josiah Stewart, when you have a smaller guy like that, and he's just such a menace to block because he's just so explosive and so relentless. You could be 240 pounds, you could be 300 pounds. If you have that relentlessness, you have that explosiveness, you're going to be a headache no matter how big you are.
Okay, before we get to our sleepers, I'm going to throw two names at you guys. I want your thoughts on them. The first one, part of that Texas A&M defensive line, one of those guys that, you go to watch Shamar Stewart and then you look at the other side and you're like, whoa, who's that guy over there? Nick Skirton, 6'3", 257, 33-inch arms. He's a big guy. I actually think he was listed at heavier than 257, but he weighed in at 257. God, he strikes me as just a relentless rusher. Probably needs some more moves, but he was second on A&M with 36 pressures. It was tough to watch that Texas A&M defensive line and not like Nick Skirton. That whole line was just fun to watch this year. The other guy, and Tim, we had mentioned him earlier. I don't think you like him as much as I do, but a guy that I would think if you traded out of 33 and moved into the 40s, Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. Now, this guy kind of fits those measurables, 6'6", 264. He's got that high RAS score, 988. He's got a 165 10-yard split. The game you kind of hear about with this guy is that 2023 Alabama game. He's kind of all over the place. I have a note here that he added 40 pounds when he got to Arkansas, so he's got that going for him. I think there's something there with him. He can be a little bit herky-jerky, sometimes struck me as a little bit slow off the football, but I think there's something there with Landon Jackson. Probably not at 33, but if you were to trade back to try to take advantage of the depth at this position, I could see him being an option there. So I'll just throw that out to both of you guys, Skirton and Jackson. Your thoughts?
Well, I can talk Nick Skirton because I kind of teased at the top that I like him way better then I like, another guy who's probably going to go early, and that's Shamar Stewart. And the big reason, Skirton produced. And Shamar Stewart, for the all-world athlete that he is, pound for pound, he is as good an athlete as you're going to find in this draft. Shamar Stewart did not produce. Just limited production throughout his career. And like I said at the beginning, edge rusher is a position where if you're going to project from college to the NFL, more often than not, guys got to produce. And that goes against Shamar Stewart, whereas Nick Skirton, I know his numbers went down at Purdue. From Purdue, when he had 10 sacks in 2013 to just 5 in 2024, at Texas A&M is still 14 tackles for loss. There's a lot to love about Nick Skirton. I know Ashley Bastock's a big fan of his, and certainly a guy who I think has, first round potential as well. This is a defensive end class, what I ranked in my position rankings, this was the number one class for me because I think there's as many as 8 or 9 different guys who could be in that first round grouping. One guy we didn't even get to talk, probably not get to talk about, Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College. Dan, I know you really like him. It's kind of just whatever flavor you want to go for. And Skirtin being able to produce, at Purdue the way he did, at being a guy who at Purdue, more, there was so much more of a focus on him, and he still produced at a high level. Gets to Texas A&M, doesn't produce quite at the same level, but still very effective. There's plenty to like with Scorin's game, and again, productivity is a reason why I would go with him ahead of Shamar Stewart.
Yeah, Ezeraku is just one of those guys. He makes impactful plays. When you watch him, you just see impactful plays, whether it's pressures that lead to picks, chasing down Tootin in the Virginia Tech game. He makes impactful plays. But 2 months ago, we're probably talking about him as maybe an option at 33, and right now it sounds like he's a first round guy. So unfortunately, the Browns might not get a shot at him. Lance, either guy, whoever you want to talk about, Skirtin, Jackson, up to you.
Well, I'll talk about Landon Jackson. Here's what I know about Landon Jackson. Is that when I looked at my notes, it comes down to what do you win with, and what Landon Jackson wins with right now is his body. And in the NFL, that doesn't work. So now, can he do it? Yeah, he's massively long. He's got really strong hands. His hands are really good. He plays with an endless motor. But those guys who win, it's kind of like Alex Wright when you look back to his rookie year when you're at UAB and you win with because you're bigger, that's really hard, and you have to learn some things. Now, as compared to Alex Wright, the thing I don't like about Landon Jackson, he doesn't bend very well. As good as he is, he has great hands, and actually, I think he could be more of a nickel 3 technique than he could be a regular defensive end. But yeah, he has great measurables with his length. He has great measurables with his effort. He has great measurables. He's just a massive human, right? And those guys are hard to block, and they move people, and he plays with a great motor, which is, you get the third and fourth quarter if he's a rotational guy. Those guys are really become a pain in the butt as an offensive coordinator because you know what they're going to give you. Now, I'm not sure if he can be elite because I don't think he bends very well. At least he hasn't shown that on film. And, I want to see, like I said, my notes simply said, what does he win with? And what he wins with right now is his ability to be bigger. And it kind of goes back to what Alex Wright. Now, Alex Wright, if you look at what his progression has been since he got to the Browns, it's been pretty awesome, in my opinion. They have really developed him well. He has turned into a really good defensive end, a nickel 3 technique. Landon Jackson has that capability. I don't know if he bends well enough. We'll see. That would be my only take is, like I said, I try to always make a point, especially when we get into this point where we're just 6 days away. When people say, what does this guy do? My Landon Jackson note says, got to bend. What do you win with? And right now he's got to win with something else besides his size, because in the NFL, those guys will be big like him.
All right, let's each throw out our kind of our sleepers, our day 3 guys, the one guy that you like that we haven't talked about yet. Tim, go ahead first.
I'll go with a bigger guy, Elijah Roberts from SMU. Maybe not technically a sleeper. He could certainly sneak in the back end of day 2, 6'3", 285. He's more of a tweener guy, but another high pass rush win rate, 22.4%. Even looking at the notes further, he led all of the FBS the last 2 seasons in pressures, 131. And like that SMU team, they weren't intimidated by the jump to the ACC. They were a 56 or 57-yard field goal away from overtime in the ACC championship game when they were getting beaten down by Clemson early on. They made a fourth quarter comeback. And with Roberts, great power, effort is not a question, and he just has a knack for punching out the football. 4 forced fumbles between 2023 and 2024, and it's something the Pittsburgh Steelers have always prioritized, guys who can punch the football loose. And if you have a guy who can do that, who knows how to get to the football, those are valuable guys to have, because they got a knack for doing it. Just like with edge rushers, you got a knack for getting to the quarterback. Sometimes you just have a knack for punching the football out. You may have to figure out Elijah Roberts' position in the NFL. Maybe he's a big defensive end, maybe he's a small defensive tackle. You can kind of work with that, but certainly there's a lot to love about Elijah Roberts. It's another guy who just feels like he has a motor that continually goes 100 miles an hour.
Who you got, Lance?
You want me to go over Elijah, or you want me to go who I got?
Give us your guy.
So I got Femi, or his name. Well, he goes by Femi Olajudejo from UCLA. His full name is Alawu Femi Olajudejo. So
well
can't
done.
really can't say his name great. I practiced it, still didn't get it right. So he was at California. He was a linebacker. So what I like about him is that he moved to defensive end when he went to UCLA. I thought they did a great job of moving him defensive end. He had a great Senior Bowl. did really well in the one-on-ones. Now, what he gives you is that he is 6'3", 260 pounds, and he's a scheme fit. And so he's a guy who can stand up, play linebacker because he's played it. And I always talk about when guys putting your hand on the ground as compared to standing up. And my dad always taught me this. That's a big difference. When young coaches would come in and tell my dad, hey, we can stand him up, we can play him at defensive end, we can play him linebacker. When your hand is on the ground, that's a big difference as if you're in a 2-point stance. And what he's done is he played both, right? So he's not only played linebacker and been successful at California, he went to UCLA and moved to edge. And he wins with athleticism. He wins with, like, he fits all the measurables, right? He's long, he has great arm, he's really good rip. He swims very well. He does everything very well in terms of technique. But what I like is that he's position flexible for Jim Schwartz. So he could play up if needed. Schwartz is all about those front seven guys. So I've never talked about Jim Schwartz being a defensive line, linebackers, and secondary. I talk about it as level 1, level 2, and level 3. And what Femi gives you is he's a guy who can play both level 1 and level 2 and play all of them. And with Jim Schwartz, that's important because Jim Schwartz is going to find a matchup. So if he likes a matchup, he can move out to defensive end. He can play the wide 9. He can anchor in there as a tight 9 on that tackle. He can move to a 3 technique. He can stand up as a linebacker. So I think he's going to be around now. Like I said, I think people are not as high as him. He grew on me at the Senior Bowl, watching him over and over in the Senior Bowl. Just his bend, his ability to play. He looks like a big linebacker to me. And in Jim Schwartz defense, that's very important.
Okay, mine is kind of a random guy. It's a little bit of a bet on traits more than anything. He's a little bit of an older prospect too. He's going to be 24 in October. But if we're talking about a day 3 guy, Andrew Berry has sort of gone away from those age guardrails sometimes on day 3. Tyler Barron from Miami. Now, he was at Tennessee for a long time. He ended up in Miami. There was a little bit of drama there with how he got to Miami and some NIL stuff and whatnot. But hey, that's modern college football. But 6'5", 258, a 162 10-yard split, 33 and a third inch arms. That relative athletic score we'll mention 9.3. PFF, he was 20th in pressures. I believe I'm not sure. I don't remember how I filtered that, but he ended up being 20th in pressures per PFF. So, the sack production, maybe not quite as high as you'd like with Tyler Barron. He had 5.5 in 2024, 6 last year with Tennessee. But this is a guy that has played a lot of football, 61 games. And I just think he'd be an interesting day 3 guy, if that's kind of what you're looking for to bet on some traits. Okay, we are going to take a break. And then when we come back, not on the YouTube, but on the podcast, we're going to take a break. And then when we come back, we will take a look at some of the defensive tackles that everybody likes. And welcome back to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Lobby, Tim Bielik, Lance Riesland. We just did defensive ends. I'm going to show you what everyone liked there at edge rusher real quick here on the screen so that you guys can see it. Those were our defensive ends that we chose to point out here. We're going to move on now to defensive tackles. Lance, you've already made your case for Mason Graham, so we're going to go out.
How did I do, by the way? Was that good? Did I sell you guys?
It was good.
It was
good.
It was
very good.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't sell me, but yeah, I mean, look, you did fine. It was good.
All right, I did. All right. That's all I need. Just fine is good. Fine is good.
Yeah, you did a nice job. But listen, we're Kent State guys, right? D's get degrees. That's what we like to say.
D's, my friend. D's get degrees.
All right, let's move on to defensive tackles then. Lance made his case for Mason Graham. Tim, why don't you give us our first guy?
All right, well, I got, as I pull up my notes real quick, I'm going to go with a guy who I had in my 7-round mock last week, Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee, 6'2", 303 pounds. Another guy, there's going to be some terms you already heard before, but 18.9% pass rush win rate, which is a defensive tackle. I mean, Lance hinted at with Mason Graham. If you have that A-gap pressure, I mean, there's nothing more valuable than doing that. And Norman Lott can really do that. Another guy with just an absolute red hot motor. Like, that's a theme. That's obviously a theme that I try to go after just because, that's the kind of guy Jim Schwartz seems to love in his scheme. Guys who are just relentless. And Norman Lott seems like he's just an explosive guy, very good with his hands. But what I think with Norman Lott, it makes him a tricky evaluation because he had limited reps. PFF only had him at about 225 snaps last season. So a guy that just, was more rotational than anything on a Tennessee team that had a really good front and included James Pierce Jr., who certainly should be, I think is going to probably be a guy who can sneak in the first round. And I think Norman Lott's a guy where you may have to have him rotational, so that's going to hurt his value a little bit. But if you want a guy who maybe only is out there for 20 plays, but those 20 plays, he's going to have his hair absolutely on fire and is going to just be relentless up the middle when the tension's on the defensive ends and pass rush situations. There's certainly value in that, especially early day 3.
Well, and I think, if we're going to talk about the Browns and how they use defensive tackles, Jim Schwartz does rotate those guys in a lot. So you've got Mike Hall, who they're certainly going to want to get a long look at this year. They signed Malik Collins, a nice signing. I liked that. I think they want to get a longer look at Jawan Briggs too. So if you added a guy like this who is maybe more rotational, I think that's okay, because Jim Schwartz, he loves to do the line change, and especially a defensive tackle. He'll switch those guys in and out mid-drive. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Lance, what do you think?
Well, my notes say on Lott, when I got the text today, he plays angry. And once again, I'm never against a defensive tackle who plays angry. So when you watch him on film, actually, it was awesome, because what you guys allowed me to do is watch guys that I don't really get into as much, because we all have our different likes, right? So when you watch Lott, I got to watch him 2 full games today, and there's a big drop off. If you look at second quarter, fourth quarter, in terms of his motor. And I don't think it has anything to do with like how he wants to play. I think it has to do with his conditioning. So he's going to have to be a rotational guy, and he's going to have to get himself in shape. And if he does that, his motor is electric. In fact, that Tennessee defensive line as a whole is really physical, fast, but they kind of fall, you watch some games, second quarter, they kind of fall off in terms of their get off and, things like that. But lots of guy, if you, in terms of, especially schematically, he's a tough guy. You're thinking second quarter, you're going rotation, you put him in the B gap. He's just like Brig. He's a tough guy to block, because offensive linemen are tired. We're 30 to 40 snaps in, and all of a sudden they bring this guy in to get in B gap, and he doesn't have any rules. And that's what I like about Schwartz. Is Schwartz doesn't, and a guy like Lott fits for Schwartz, because Schwartz doesn't worry about what you're not good at. He focuses on what you're good at. And so many coaches, I know I did that before, and I tried not to at the end of my career. Whatever a guy's good at, focus on that. And Lott can get in a gap and go, and he's outstanding, heavy. Got to get himself in shape, but there's a lot of upside. And again, there'll be a guy who likes him because of his what he does when he's fresh.
All right, Lance, give us another name.
Oh, so I got a couple guys, but I'm gonna go with. I wrote about Tyleik Williams today, and Kenneth Grant is another guy from Michigan. But I'm gonna go with Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State. And so as I've done this process, I try to, just like Tim and just like you, I try to create like tiers of guys that I like based on production. I also, as Dan, as you said, I don't care what anybody else says. I try to just stay in my lane, watch the film, and see what I see. So forever, months, I had Grant and Graham as the top 2 guys. Now, Nolan was there, Sanders were there, some other guys that were in the second tier, including with Tyleik Williams. So the more I watch Tyleik Williams on film, he's the best defensive lineman on that Ohio State defensive lineman. He's 6'3", he's 335 pounds, and he can move. He came into Ohio State at 360 pounds, and he was a guy who was 360, but he's one of those big guys who had like incredible like lateral skills. I bet you he can dunk a basketball. Like, he's one of those freaky kind of athletes who just is a big, heavy guy. Committed himself to getting in shape, and this year he was outstanding. Now, he's played in a bunch of games. He plays, I think having college experience helps with NFL. He's a guy that I've just fallen in love with. Kenneth Grant's another guy from Michigan I love, but I'm going to go with Tyleik Williams here, because just the fact that when you watch him on film and you see how heavy he is, and you see his motor skills, and you see his ability to move laterally, short area burst, his hands, his violence, his ability to do everything that you want as a defensive tackle. You're talking about a guy who potentially will be a 3-down guy, which in the NFL is huge, right? A guy who can anchor and a guy who can rush on third down. Going back to my guy, Mason Graham, Tyleik Williams and for me, he's in the same category potentially as Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. I really like Tyleik Williams. He's really grown on me. I actually fell in love with him watching Jack Scheuer. That's when I fell in love with him, watching him over and over, going, this guy's really good. So I'm gonna go with Tyreek Williams for all the things I said. He's a physical freak. He's 340 pounds. His best football's in front of him. He's gonna have to stay in shape. But his hands, all the things you talk about that we have talked, he's really good.
Yeah, Tim, we talked about him a lot in our mock draft last week. I don't remember if we actually took him or not, but he was in that discussion in that second round. So he's a guy that, again, kind of right in that wheelhouse for where the Browns might have to make a decision where, okay, do you go edge rusher? Quarterback could be in the mix. Then you've got, defensive tackles, and Tyreek Williams might be sitting right there.
Yeah, and I think there was watching every Ohio State game, last couple of years, and I was always felt like there was a notable difference when Tyreek Williams was in the game versus when he wasn't in the game, because you would always get more pressure on the interior with Tyreek Williams. And I feel like his presence, as good as Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau are, and both guys should be day 2 picks, I think Williams really made them better because of his presence there. His ability to disrupt, the size, Lance mentioned, obviously, Williams cutting down in weight. That's such a big thing for defensive tackles. I mean, especially if you can get him down to a lighter weight. You can play 360, but if you're down to 320, I mean, just imagine how much faster you can be with that kind of strength. And for defensive tackles, more than anything, you get that extra little bit of quickness. That quickness in the interior means so much. If you have that half a step off that first step, explosiveness, just that little extra bit, you can blow up an entire offensive line from the inside out. So, and that's certainly Tyreek Williams is capable of doing that. And there's definitely an argument to be made for, as good as Ohio State's defensive line was, he was the best guy on that front. And that's including 2 guys who were, if I remember right, when they were recruiting class, they were top 5 guys, and Tyreek Williams was maybe in the top 100. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay, Tim, give us another name.
I'm going to go with a guy Ohio State actually saw last season, CJ West from Indiana. I'm going with a completely different profile than I had with Omar Norman Lott. 6'1", 316 pounds, pass rush win rate solid at 10.1, but the run stop win rate really good at 11.6. And he was the reason Indiana had the best run defense in college football, 80.2 yards allowed per game. And I know people are going to say, well, Indiana didn't play a great schedule. They played Michigan, they played Ohio State, and they played Notre Dame. And I don't think any of those teams, I think between those 3 teams, the only notable run of those 3 was Jeremiah Love's, I think, 98-yard touchdown against Indiana in that first round playoff game in Notre Dame and under the lights. And that was awesome. But with CJ West, I really first noticed him against Ohio State when they just couldn't run on Indiana. People talked about, how Ohio State really had a good running game this year. Chip Kelly did a lot of great things for there. CJ West in the interior made it incredibly difficult. And the way he does it is, again, motor. Well, I'm going to keep saying it, motor and energy. That just made him so difficult to match up with on the interior there. He's got the ideal build for a run stopper, and he's got power, but I also think he's got enough upside as he continues to progress as a pass rusher. Right now, I think you'd be drafting him as kind of your run stopping defensive tackle. I think he's got the build, maybe a smaller type of your prototypical nose tackle at 316 pounds. Shorter arms, though, with CJ West, and it's going to be about another guy talk about the same thing, but I think with West going up to, Indiana and anchoring what became a really fun defense to watch, it was really impressive, especially the way he handled himself, like I said, against Michigan and Ohio State.
Okay, we're going to move through these guys so we can get to kind of pounding the table for the guys we like. So I'm going to throw out a name here, and then I want to hear you guys throw out your last couple names. This is a guy I've talked about on this pod before, and I'm just really fascinated by him. I love that Texas A&M defensive line, Shamar Turner, the other Shamar on that line. This is, he was actually an edge rusher for a little while. He was doing some edge rushing for them when they had Walter Nolan. So, I mean, could imagine him and Walter Nolan and all that whole group together. How crazy that was a couple of years ago. But listen, he is undersized. There are some questions about, is there a little, I don't want to say Ndamukong Suh in there as far as some on-field actions, but there are some questions about that. But Lance, that might go to kind of adding a little mean to this defensive line. So I don't hate that, but the guy just, his hands, he's always rushing. And I think if he ends up in the right spot, somebody can work around that lack of size at defensive tackle, and they're going to get a guy that can get in the backfield and be a disruptor. So Shamar Turner is one of those guys. I don't know if it's in Cleveland, but I think you get him in the 3rd round. There's certain guys that I like to say, if you get this guy here, you're going to be really happy you got him. And I think if you get Shamar Turner in the 3rd round, I think you're going to be really happy with that pick, assuming that you can make a guy at that size work at defensive tackle. So let's go back to Lance. Why don't you throw out a name for us? We're going to kind of lightning round these guys.
I'm gonna go with Aeneas Peoples, and the reason I'm gonna go with now this is the anti-Tim pick in terms of I love what Tim does in terms of like measurements and things like that. So Aeneas Peoples, when he will test as poorly as any defensive tackle in the country, he's got really short arms. He's not very fast. He doesn't look great, but put on the film, he's a guy who is just absolutely disruptive. And going back to CJ West, first of all, CJ West started at Kent State, so just want to throw that out there. But he's kind of in terms of um, same kind of thing. He's not he doesn't impress you, so it's like one of those things. Like, what are the measurables? And this will be a balance, right? And going back to what Tim does with all the incredible numbers, because those things matter. This is a guy that doesn't care about those. This is a guy who won't test. He's not strong. He's not fast. He's not twitchy. He's not sudden. He's not super awesome at the point of attack. But if you can get him, he's a rotational guy. Put him in the gap. He's a very tough guy to block. He plays with a relentless motor. He's angry. He's a guy the reason I like him is because the measurements don't match what you see on film for me. Because when you see the measurements, they're awful. And when you watch the film is really good. So we'll go with Aeneas Peoples, Virginia Tech.
Tim, give us somebody else.
I'm going to go to Maryland. Jordan Phillips, 6'1.5", 313 pounds. This is very much a traits over production kind of guy. He pretty much had almost no production through college for 3 seasons. Solid pass rush win rate of 11%. This was a guy who was a standout of the East-West Shrine game. And it seems like a guy who's just kind of one of those sleeper guys, guy you bet on because he's got quickness off the snap. He's physical. He plays with leverage. And at this point in his career, he's more of a run stopping guy, but again, 20 years old. And he's a guy who all the things you read about him, there is no question that this guy is a worker. And I think you can never have enough high character people on a football team. And I think you get him in the lab with Myles Garrett, with all these good defensive linemen around him, help him kind of learn some of the techniques to go with the natural physical gifts he has. There's certainly some work that has to be done with Jordan Phillips, but if you're patient with him, you bring him along and you kind of let him be a run stopper early in his career, and eventually he develops more as a pass rusher, you might have something at least rotational to work with.
Okay, there we go. Some edge rushers, some defensive tackles. We're going to take a break. Here's what we've got coming now. We're going to everybody's going to pick a guy here and say, this is who I kind of pound the table for the guy. This is the guy that I want the Cleveland Browns to take. Doesn't matter where. It could be at number 2 if you want. Lance, you already kind of did that, but we'll let you do it again with somebody else. Wherever you want to make the case for a guy, you can make the case for a guy. Then we're going to do a mock draft. And then I think this is going to be fun. I want to know some names that you guys are kind of keeping an eye on as we move forward, whether they're obvious names, sleeper names, whatever, just some guys that have stood out to you that you're going to be keeping an eye on as we move into drafts in the future. So quick break here on the pod, and then we will be back to make our case for some guys. Back on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, Dan Lobby, Tim Bielik, Lance Reisland, our NFL draft preview. We are actually doing this live on our YouTube channel. If you're not a subscriber, it's Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. So get subscribed. You will start seeing more and more live stuff there. And of course, if you're not following us on Twitter, head over to Orange Brown Talk and give us a follow there, Twitter, X, whatever we want to call it. You get the pod that gets posted there every day, some social clips, all kinds of stuff going on there. If Instagram is more your speed, we're on Instagram as well. That's Orange and Brown Talk. And of course, I got to tell you, Football Insider subscriber, I know we have some subscribers watching now. I always send it out to our texters. If you want to get involved in that, it's cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page to get information on how to get signed up, become one of our texters, all that good stuff. Okay, so Andrew Berry gives you a call. Tim Bielik, who do you want me to take? Who's one guy that if we come out of this draft next weekend, you're going to say, Andrew Berry, you nailed it. Great pick. What do you say?
3 words: Cam Scat Fever. For those of you that didn't listen to the podcast last week, I'm not going to go on like a 5-minute poem, the legend of Cam Scataboo. I think anybody who's watched Arizona State the last 2 seasons knows what I'm talking about just the ferocity he plays with, and the fact that people are going to throw out the Peyton Hillis comparison that he just kind of runs that way, but there's so much more to him than that. The receiver Cam Scadaboo is just so much fun to watch. You don't expect a guy with that frame to be as good out in the open field, catching passes on wheel routes, and just what I think he can bring from a vibes perspective is so enticing. I mean, just you have a guy with that aura. I mentioned last week. He's a guy when you hear him talk, he's kind of got a presence about him as a person. And I think that kind of presence, that kind of attitude would be a good thing for this Browns run game to have. Just a guy who's going to bring that energy, bring that nastiness, and that type of stuff is infectious. You have a guy who's like that. That spreads to your offensive line. That gets them a little more fired up when he's in the ball game. That gets everybody blocking, feeling good. That generates some momentum, some rhythm for you. And he's a guy who can rip off chunk plays pretty well. So I think there's obviously really good running backs in this class. I think as long as the Browns come away with a guy especially, day 2, maybe 3rd round. Right now you got 2 third-round picks for that early 4th round pick. I think one of those 3's got to be a running back. And I know in my 7th-round mock tomorrow, I'm going to drop spoilers on here. I got them taking Caleb Johnson from Iowa, but man, Cam Scadaboo, you want to talk about the vibes player. That's a vibes player right there.
We should have seen that coming, Lance.
No, there's no question. And actually, I was like, yeah, why did I was like, oh, of course it's scam. You know what? But he does. Here's what he does. And Caleb Johnson too. So it's funny. He kind of, I love that concept, right? Because what he does, regardless of how he catches the ball, my big thing with the Browns in terms of, as I try to think about the offense as an offensive coordinator, and I will tell you, having a new quarterback, whoever that may be, um, going back to what Stefanski does, having Jerry Judy, thinking that your defense is elite, all the things that people think the Browns are far away. I don't think they're far away. For me, I will go into the season, and Dan, you and I talk 3 days a week during the season. I really think the key is they have to get to 2nd and 5. Cam Scadaboo gets them to 2nd and 5. Now, Caleb Johnson is the same kind of guy. I think Damian Martinez is the same type of guy, depending on where they get these guys. And like you said, it all pans out in the draft. But for a back, I don't need a home run guy. I don't in terms of a running back with the Kevin Stefanski's offense. I need you to get to 2nd and 5 because then I get to dictate what I call as an offense coordinator. And I think that's when Kevin Stefanski is at his best because now you can do whatever you want 2nd and 5. You can go 13 personnel and go empty. You can go 13 personnel and run power. You can do whatever you want as long as you win on 1st down. Cam Scadaboo is going to because he's a lean guy. He gets you to 2nd and 5, and I think that's so important, so underrated. It's boring. People don't like that. That's what I would. If I'm at 2nd and 5 as a play caller, I'm going to be more successful than I would be if not.
Okay, so Andrew Berry just hung up with Tim. He's dialing Lance's number. Calls up Lance, says, Lance, you'll never believe this, but Tim thinks I should take Cam Scadaboo. Give me a guy, Lance. Who's a guy that you think I have to take that when Saturday night, when I call you back and say, how did I do? You're going to say, this guy is why this draft was awesome.
Well, first of all, I'm going to thank him for taking Mason Graham 2nd. That's the first thing I'll say.
That's nice.
Very good choice. It's, first of all, I appreciate you listening to me on him 2nd. Then I'm going to go with Luther Burden. And here's why Luther Burden makes a difference, right? So the Browns right now they have to be perfect on offense. And last year you saw a lot of the offsides. You saw a lot of the penalties. And you had everybody saying they're undisciplined. And I've had a lot of discussions with this. I don't agree with that. Now, they do need to fix that. But anytime you see an offense that has to be perfect all the time because they don't have elite playmakers, that's what ends up happening. Now, I will tell you, I was a really good offensive coordinator when I had really good players. I was a really poor offensive coordinator when I had very bad players. And it doesn't matter what level you're at. So once in a while, you need to throw the ball out there and you need to not block anybody. You need to do it wrong. You need to make the wrong call, and the guy just makes a play for you. Now, it could be a touchdown, could be 60 yards, but more importantly, it could just be in like an 8-yard run and get you a 2nd 2. And then on 2nd 2, you throw a play action, you hit a shot over top, right? So there's, for me, Luther Burden is a space guy. He's a touch guy. I think he's a guy, whatever it may be. And I'll go with Tim's philosophy in terms of however they want to do it. They need to find a guy who gets easy yards. The Browns have to work too hard on offense right now to be successful. It's too hard to score points by going 10 to 15 plays every time. Now, you can do it once or twice a game, But really, you need a guy you can throw it out there and you go, you know what, I didn't block it right. And that's actually, I do that when I was coaching. I would always show my team bad plays. You win with players. And Tim, and Dan, I'm going to throw a quote out here that you and I haven't heard
Love
in a
it.
while. Players over plays. Give me a touch, get him in space, let's go. And I think that's what Luther Burden gives you.
Okay, well, Andrew Barry's just called me up now. So I'm tired of hearing from Tim. I'm tired of talking to Lance. Lance keeps saying this players over plays thing. It's driving me crazy. I'm going to make a case for a guy. Tim, you're going to like this. We've talked about this a little bit. Lance, I don't think I've talked to you about this. I never thought that I would be the guy sitting here saying, just do this. But I'm just going to say it because listening to Andrew Barry talk today and thinking about this quarterback class and acknowledging that they're not taking a quarterback at 2, which, by the way, if you went 3-14 and had the worst offense in the NFL and are remaking your quarterback room and you're not drafting a quarterback at 2, what you're telling me is you don't believe in this class. Like, you don't believe there is a surefire franchise quarterback in this class. Now, you might like some of these other guys, but you're telling me you don't necessarily believe these guys are surefire franchise quarterback guys. So if you take a Tyler Shook or a Jackson Dart or the guy I'm going to bring up here, you're rolling the dice with them. You're saying maybe he's a future franchise guy, or maybe we're going to be right back here next year having the same discussion. So why not just go big and just bring in Jalen Milroe and just see what you got? I am not like, and I'm saying this as a guy that I am not the biggest Jalen Milroe. Like, when I watch him play, I have real concerns about him translating to the NFL. I don't think it's going to be, I don't know. If I had to put odds on him working out, I would actually lean towards it not working. And I think there are people who make the case pretty regularly that how much did Alabama actually trust him last year, which means something too. But all I'm saying is, if you're going to take a chance on a guy and you're just going to end up being right back here again next year anyway, still trying to figure out quarterback, why not just take a chance on Jalen Milroe? And if it works, great. At the very least, he's going to be your Taysom Hill as a rookie. Like, he's just going to be a guy you can bring in and be your Taysom Hill. Now, obviously, he has to be more than that for it to hit as a legitimate quarterback pick. But just bet on those traits. Bet on a guy that's got 4.37 speed, can get the ball down the field, and see what happens. I'm saying this as someone who doesn't necessarily believe wholeheartedly it's going to work, so maybe I'm not selling it. And Lance, the look on your face when I said that was like, I thought you were going to jump off the call here.
I didn't think you were going there. I'm going to be shocked.
But I'm just, I got to be honest with you. None of these other guys excite me. Like, I was a Shedeur 2 guy for a long time. I just don't think that's going to happen. And I just can't get excited. And even for the guy that made the case that the Florida game wasn't that bad for Jackson Dart, I can't get that. I just can't get that excited about any of these guys. So I guess to me, it's like, you know what? Just do it. Now, I'm not saying don't trade a first-round pick next year to go get him. It's got to be at the right spot. And if you do move, it's got to be at the right price. But if things fall your way and you got a chance to add him to your quarterback room, why not just take a shot at it?
Yeah, and I the way I thought about this, I'm with you 100%. I was joking before the show. I was saying, when Dan was telling me about this, I was like, one of us, one of those things. But the way I thought about Jalen Milroe is in baseball terms. When you talk about baseball prospects, we talk about tools like the hit tool, the fielding tool for a pitcher, the control tool, things like that. When you look at all these quarterbacks in this draft, Jalen Milroe has the only elite, the most elite tool of everybody in this quarterback class, and that's his speed. I mean, it's not only 4.37 40 on his pro day, he looks the part of 4.37 40 on his pro day. I mean, he plays that fast. Like, we're talking running away from corners and defensive backs, that kind of speed. Andrew Berry said it was pretty close to Lamar Jackson. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say Jalen Milroe is faster than Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is one of one as a quarterback. And yeah, I mean, we all got that wrong in 2018. I think with Jalen Milroe, what hurt him was the more I kind of went back and actually looked more at his 2023 film when he had better numbers, I think the scheme change hurt him a little bit because what happened was Nick Saban retired and Tommy Rees went to the Browns, and then they brought in Kalen DeBoer, who I think is a really good coach, but he had just coached Michael Penix Jr. the previous 2 seasons, and you cannot get more different at quarterback than Michael Penix Jr. and Jalen Milroe. I mean, you have Michael Penix Jr. is kind of a lefty pocket passer quarterback who just gets the ball out, incredibly accurate. He's going to win from the pocket, and I mean, he's already translating into NFL success. He already looks pretty good right now in Atlanta. Jalen Milroe goes through progressions better than people realize he does. And the stat that stood out to me, and I hate that I can't remember who tweeted this, but it was someone had a tweet that basically they broke down all the number of plays that certain these quarterbacks had, non-RPO, non-play action, and basically just straight drop back and throw the football plays. And Jalen Milroe had the highest percentage of those guys at about 70%. I feel like in a way that's misusing him because yeah, you can run the read option, you can run RPO, but if you're just having to run straight drop back, not even incorporating a bootleg game to him, I think you're misusing the things that make him special. Now he has obviously I've talked before about the mechanics that had to be fixed. That's why I wasn't concerned about his fourth quarter quarterback rating. I mean, mechanics got to be right, and he has so much room to grow as a passer. The fact that he's worked with Jordan Palmer, who's obviously a quarterback guru. I know Mary Kay wrote about him talked to Jordan Palmer earlier in the draft cycle about Jalen Milroe. The fact that you have an incredibly intelligent guy in Jalen Milroe, academic Heisman winner, a guy who comes from a military family background. Work ethic is instilled into this guy. He's not just the athlete you want to bet on, but I think he's the person you want to bet on. And it takes a special kind of person to harness those kind of athletic traits and become a better version of what you were in college. And I think if, like Dan said, if you're going to take that gamble, Jalen Milroe feels like that guy to take a gamble on.
And I do think, look, they have Kenny Pickett and they have Joe Flacco, which is telling me that's another sign. That's telling me that whoever they bring in, they think that guys might not even be good enough to be a backup right away. So they're setting this up to everything they're doing is telling me that they don't trust this quarterback class. Just everything is pointing to that. And I think some of this too might be like, I'll just full disclosure, I don't think they're going to be very good this year. And so I don't mind just taking a shot on a guy like that. I'm not thinking that they're going to win 8 games, 9 games and contend for the playoffs. So that's part of it too. Like, I just don't mind if you just want to see what this guy is. And maybe there's a chance Tommy Rees is sitting in that building saying, listen, guys, we tried to bench him in 2023. So don't draft Jalen Milroe. But maybe Tommy Rees really thinks he can do something with this guy. Lance, you've been sitting there making faces this whole time. So we'll let you go and then we'll get to the mock draft.
I was trying not to. So I'm going to go. I'm not going to agree. And here's why. And first of all, everything you're saying in terms of physical traits, absolutely. But I think, first of all, I would hope the Browns don't think they're not going to be competitive. And sometimes I think coaches think that, and we're allowed to think that as the outsiders, but I hope they're not thinking that. And if they're not thinking that, I think the tight end class, the running back class, the defensive line class, the safety class, I think those things are all too deep right now. If you're getting a bridge, if you say, I'm not, and Dan, I'm going to go off with what you said, like, we are not high on any of these guys. And that's kind of the vibe I've got from, since they signed these guys, like, they like some of these guys, but they're not like, you know what, we're not hanging our careers on these guys, right? So if that's the case, there's too many other holes to fill. And there's the holes that you have to fill. It's a really deep class in those holes. So for me, if you don't think, like, I'm not taking a flyer on Jalen Milroe, even though I do think he's talented. And I think, and Tim, I will say this, and I appreciate you saying you were wrong. I was so wrong on Lamar Jackson. I mean, he's as good from the pocket. Like, no one knew that he was going to be that. To say that, Jalen Milroe can't be that would be wrong on me because, who knows with quarterbacks, right? None of us know. But I will say the Browns have too many holes, and the Browns also have a lot of good players at a lot of other positions. And as much as I think that they can be competitive this year, I don't think they're that far off from being pretty good. And if they can get solid quarterback play, if JOK comes back, et cetera, I know there's a lot of factors that come into that, but I'm not wasting. If I don't think there's a guy who can help me, and I don't think there's a guy who can play for me, there's too many positions that, first of all, are too deep and that I need as a program, as an organization. There's too many good tight ends. There's too many good running backs. There's too many good safeties. There's too many good edge guys. I'm not wasting where I can get a guy who could maybe be a starter on day 3. I'm not wasting him on a guy. Now, if they do think that he's a player that can play for them later, great. But I'm not taking a flyer because there's too many other guys, there's too many holes, and there's too many good players at positions I need.
Well, in the interest of full disclosure, I thought maybe making the case for Mason Taylor would be a little boring. So wanted to have a little fun with that one at least. All right, there we go. Our Jalen Milroe segment here. And again, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be anything in the NFL. It's just more of the concept of like Andrew Berry sitting up there saying this guy has a rare physical traits. Like that just stuck with me. Like maybe he wants to figure out a way to get this guy.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's something about that. And I will say, when you can get a plus running game and a guy who can throw the ball, the problem is when you play like the Ravens, you have to play base defense. And when you play base defense against Lamar Jackson, you're so in trouble. So what he does just by him being out there, by what personnel he gets on defense because of his skill set, you're right. I mean, Milroe might be worth a chance.
All right. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, I'm going to borrow this thought again from somebody else. Again, I apologize for not remembering who this was from, but I wonder if part of it, any bit, is also is the idea of, and I don't think any team should think this way necessarily. The idea, if you're the Browns, are like, well, we've spent the last 6 years having to try to game plan for Lamar Jackson, and how much of a pain that is. What if we had our own Lamar Jackson? I'm not saying Jalen Milroe is going to be Lamar Jackson or as good as Lamar Jackson, but that guy creates so many unique matchup problems. I mean, that's why he has such a great record against the NFC. They don't see him a lot, and he's able to torch them that way. And the teams that see him more have a better understanding of how to play against him more. So if you have your own guy who can be that unique quarterback matchup, it's at least worth investigating. And hey, I mean, again, if you miss and you're not good, then you just go back at it again next year or in 2027 and just keep plugging away at it till you get it. I mean, Wayne Gretzky said it best: you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
There we go. That sums it up. That's the Jalen Milroe argument right there. That's the Wayne Gretzky quote. All right. One more quick break, and then we are going to do I didn't warn these guys we're going to do this. We're doing 7 rounds. We're going all 7 rounds. Don't worry though. We're gonna keep it moving along. We're not going to sit there and all 3 of us argue over a pick. We're going to split it up. But that's coming up here on the other side. And back on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, Dan Lobby, Tim Bielik, Lance Riceland. It is mock draft time. We are going back to the PFF mock draft simulator. So for purposes of, like I said, kind of trying to keep this moving, because we do go a little bit slow on these mock drafts when we argue, what I think we're going to do, first of all, we're going to take Travis Hunter at number 2, just because that seems like where this is going. So going to call an audible there. But I think what we're going to do is we're each going to get to make a pick. So like Tim, you'll go first, then Lance, you'll make the next pick out, and everybody, you guys can make your case for a guy, and then we'll just make the pick, if that makes any sense. So let's get this thing started here on the PFF mock draft simulator. And Cam Ward, as expected, goes number 1. We are going to take Travis Hunter at number 2. As I do this, there was some discussion in the YouTube chat. Tim, who's your comparison for Travis Hunter?
I mean, I think I've seen mixed comparisons out there. Odell Beckham Jr., like prime Odell Beckham Jr., like early Giants career Odell Beckham Jr. I think we all forget how special Odell Beckham Jr. was in those days. And I think another comparison I saw, Chad Johnson, the Ocho Cinco back in the day. We always think about his end zone dances or whatever, but the guy was just an outstanding football player. And I just think Travis Hunter is just such a unique receiver with, world-class athleticism, generational athlete, and ball skills like you wouldn't believe about. Like, watch his touchdown against North Dakota State. I think he's got a defender falling on him. Like, he's falling towards the football, and he still pulls it in. It's just ridiculous, the ball skills he has. Like, pretty much you throw the ball anywhere near him, he's going to catch it.
Okay. So I need you guys, I've got a random number generator up here on my phone. You can't see that maybe, but I got a random number generator up there on my phone. Don't worry about the number that's already there. That was on there when I Googled it.
It says 3.
Yeah, it says 3. I need you guys to pick a number between 1 and 10. Lance, pick a number between 1 and 10.
I'm going to play the odds. I'm going to go 5.
5. Well, okay. Tim?
8.
Okay, the person who's closest and you can go over is going to get to make our next pick here. All right. So I'm hitting generate. Is this going to work here? Come on. There we go. 7. Oh, Lance, you missed by 1. And I know this hurts, Lance, because for those of you watching on the YouTube channel, sitting at the very top of the board with the Browns going on the clock at number 33 is Luther Burden the third.
Should be Price is Right. You can't go over.
Well, then we'd probably be starting over again if the number was like 4 or if the number was 10, we'd all be starting over. No, 2, we'd all be starting over.
All right, so Tim, you get to make our pick here at number 33. I'll kind of scroll the board here with Luther Burden, Omar Norman Lott. If you see any names, you can make the pick here. I mean, we don't really need to make a much of an argument here. We know where Lance would want to go. I would be okay with a lot of Norman Lott, Burden. I love Jaden Higgins. He'd be a guy that I'd like there. So where do you want? Tyleek Williams is on the board, and I can look for somebody if you want me to. But you are up for this pick.
Well, I'm going to correct a mistake from last week where I'm not going to forget we took Travis Hunter second overall.
Yes, that's fair.
I'm going to correct myself, and I'm going to also spoil my 7-round mock that's coming out for those of you on YouTube. It comes out Friday morning for everybody that's listening to this on Saturday. If you haven't actually seen it, check it out. If you have a few minutes, I think it's Jalen Milroe time, and I keep I keep having this paranoia that he's not going to make it past the Steelers at 21 unless Shedeur Sanders is still there. Now, I know PFF doesn't like him. I would take that gamble. I really would. And maybe I'm crazy, but I mean, I keep thinking like he has the best individual single tool of any quarterback in this draft. Like I said earlier, the intangibles are outstanding. I'm probably more paranoid than most people that he's going to make it to day 2. I mean, if he makes it to day 2, I would still take him. If Shedeur Sanders goes like 3 to the Giants and Jackson Dartsay goes 9 to the Saints, then I'm doing whatever I can to make sure I get ahead of Pittsburgh on the Browns. Make sure I get Jalen Milroe, because I think the last thing you want to do is be in a position where you have the 33rd pick and you miss out on the top 4 quarterbacks. As much as you don't necessarily like any of these guys, but considering your needed quarterback, I feel like you have to at least swing on somebody. And because I feel like swinging and missing is better than not swinging at all. And being left with, again, no offense, Tyler Shuck or somebody of that ilk, like Will Howard, Kyle McCord, somebody like that, because then you're basically signaling that our quarterback answers in 2026 or 2027. And when you've been through 3 and 14, that is a long time to wait for at least another guy that you could say this guy might be the future, because might be the future is better than not the future.
All right. Is Lance, I'm on the mock draft screen. I don't have the call pulled up here. Is Lance still there? Or did he just leave? Because Lance, you're up next at least.
Wow. I mean, he not only made his pick, he threw my guy Shuck under the butt. I mean, well done.
he did. That's the thing that like I thought maybe that was the end.
I think we might be the most dysfunctional war room of all time. Like, imagine all the secrets getting out. Someone sends a text to Mary Kay and be like, "Can you believe what happened in the Browns war room last night?"
By the way, I'm so sold on Jalen Milroe that when Tim said that pick, I was like audibly like, "What?" So I guess I didn't really sell it well
like,
when the time came to pull the trigger.
I was shocked. And then he starts throwing guys in the bus that I was like, wow. He's going all, and whatever Kool-Aid you got, whatever Milroe Kool-Aid you guys got, man, I didn't send it my way.
If we're going to be fair, though, who among us would have ever predicted Michael Penix Jr. would have gone 8 and Bo Nix would have gone 12 last year? Not me. I guarantee you that much.
That's fair. Okay. Well, Lance.
I would have done Penix. I was way off on Bo Nix, though. I will say that. No question.
Hey, me too. I called it a panic pick.
Right,
well, Lance, you are up here. We're at number 67. So Norman Lott has made it. Elijah Arroyo is a tight end option.
Do me a favor. Throw up the tight ends. Can you get the tight ends?
I see Elijah Arroyo is there.
Yeah, Arroyo's there. Let's see who else is there. Mason Taylor made it really far in one of the. Oh, there's Mason Taylor.
He's there.
There's your guy Fannin.
My guy Terrence Ferguson is there.
Terrence Ferguson. So
all
the good tight ends are that you would expect to be here are here.
Well, my first 5 picks came out, and I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to go with Harold Fannin. just because I want guys in space. I want the Browns to not have to be perfect and go 10 to 12 plays. Harold Fannon's the guy who can run after catch. I'm going Harold Fannin. Lock it in.
Well, and you got to get Jalen Milroe some weapons. So,
I mean, my goodness, whatever happened with you guys? I mean, you guys make some calls that I wasn't aware of.
Hey, I wrote about this in my mock. I mean,
I thought we were close. I didn't get the text. I didn't get the message.
Well, I don't want to compare Lamar Jackson and Jalen Milroe, but when the Ravens got Lamar, they drafted Mark Andrews. A couple years later, they drafted Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kohler. They over time build an offense around him. So tight end, I love it. And Fannin is just such an elusive guy in the middle. I think he's just so much fun to watch. And I think he could be a very exciting tight end.
All right, Tim, we are back to you at number 94 here. So here's some of the guys on the board, and I can look for guys if you need me to.
All right, yeah, I'm seeing receivers. I'm seeing Damian Martinez.
Like
why Milam's there. Ashton Gelati is there.
Gelati.
I feel bad because I'm not going to pronounce. Devin Neal's also there. He's another guy that's fun. What was about the tackle from Arizona? I believe it's Jonas Savanaia.
Well done. That's it.
I think that's how you pronounce it.
You got it.
I got it.
There he is.
You got it.
Right there.
I think it seemed like he was like a fringe day one guy, I think, at one point in time. And I'm a big proponent that no matter how good or how bad your offensive line is, you take a guy and I say you have the best offensive line. Great. Get another guy. And I mean, this is another guy who has the potential to play in tackle, guard, and I think he could do very well at either position, especially because, they restructured Jack Conklin's contract, so he's in the last year of a deal. You've got Joel Bitonio, who's coming back, even though he was kind of debating retirement. As much as I love running backs and skill players in general, I do want to give some love to the offensive line. Sometimes you got to have an unsexy pick once in a while and just go for some offensive line up front. And again, more blocking for Jalen Milroe in 2026 and beyond.
All right.
You guys are living on that Milroe, man. I love it. Just stick to your guns.
Well, Tim has gone 2026 and beyond. My whole case was, hey, you're going to be back here looking for a quarterback again next year. So let's see what this guy can do.
We're building an offense around him. Well done.
All right, Lance. 10 picks later.
I'm going to Legido.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
He's got so much upside. Long, fits the scheme.
Right on brand too with the guy we talked about already. Now this is so it goes from 104 and the Browns don't pick again until 179. And I've got to think that they're going to move up into the 5th round because that feels like a sweet spot for running backs, maybe a wide receiver, one of these day 3 receivers. I feel like you've got to get into the late 4th or somewhere in the 5th round. So maybe they use some of those 6th round picks to move up. But unfortunately, here we are. It's been a long Saturday. The Browns picked at 104, and now they're not on the clock again until 179. And Tim, you get this pick.
All right.
So you can make Lance happy and take a second quarterback and Tyler Shook.
Well, do we need 4 quarterbacks on the roster? Probably not. When Ewers is there, I'm not taking him. I saw the Cubase article dropped the other day, and I think I hate to do this to throw Quinn Ewers under the bus, but I think they had his bust percentage to like 96%.
Jalen Lane is a guy I really like as a day 3 receiver.
Yeah, very, very fast guy. Who do we have at running back that's still out there?
Yeah, see, and this is the problem. I feel like if you wait this long, if you don't get into the 5th, you're going to miss out on some of these running backs.
Yeah. Kyle Monunga is an interesting
guy. Taj Brooks is there.
Rocket Sanders is another guy that is an older guy, but going off.
Jordan James is still on the board. That's an interesting one.
I'll go Jordan James. I mean, I think if you can get 80% Bucky Irving, and I think in some ways Jordan James, he could be a slightly discount Bucky Irving. If you get that, then that's plenty good enough because if you're not going to get a high-end running back, at least get a guy who could contribute in a tandem, and then maybe down the road, because if you especially bring Nick Chubb back, you can roll with a trio of Jerome Ford, Jordan James, and then Nick Chubb is your short yardage back and your power back. So I think it could be an interesting tandem. And plus, James does have, I think we talked about last week, pretty good explosive run rate numbers.
All right, so Jordan James is going to be the pick there. I think if you were going to take a running back, you had to pounce on one there because these guys are going to start coming off the board. So Lance, we're up to you now at 192. And this is just that run of 6th round. If you guys want me to trade away one of these picks for like picks 3 years from now, I'm fine with that because this is too many 6th round picks. But Lance, I know you want to take guys, so
I do. I like these late round guys. A lot of film. Let's see. Oh, there he is.
Listen, this is your pick, Lance.
Let's go safeties. Can you just give me
Yeah,
nothing but safeties? Is there any guys that I've looked at?
Let me
Safeties
pull up
or
our safeties here.
There's one I took before in a 7-round mock, Malachi Moore.
I'm with you there, Tim. I
Okay.
like him. He was on my outskirts, but I like him. I'm gonna go Malachi Moore. I like that one.
All right.
I think he can, and more importantly, he can be a 1 high hat. So I like him.
Well, and you know me, this team needs to fill that safety position at some point. So now we're at 200, still 3 picks left. Tim, you're up.
Yeah, let's go through. I'm not sure where I want to go exactly with this pick.
Wow, I can't believe Tyler Shook is still on the board.
Yeah, why does nobody want Tyler Shook? Did nobody go to his 21st birthday party?
I want him. I would have taken him.
It's 10 years ago.
If I would have said 6, I would have had the pick, and it would have been Tyler Shook.
Well, yeah, I'm looking. There's some guys out there. Jack Nelson, the tackle from Wisconsin, is interesting. Again, more offensive line depth's not a bad idea. I know, Lance, you like Jalen Travis. What else do we have at receiver? I'm trying to think of like what else.
Yeah, let's see might still be sitting out there at receiver as we get here deeper into day 3.
It does get hard when guys are passed over almost 200 times. I think there's one of your guys, Theo Weiss Jr.
He's interesting. He's an interesting guy, kind of a bigger target, can go up and get the football. I wouldn't mind bringing a guy like that in to compete.
I will say I would go back up a little bit. Pairing Travis Hunter with his old teammate and Jimmy Horn Jr., smaller guy, but another guy who just creates space, speed, gives you something at receiver that you don't quite have. And I think you obviously have a big guy in Cedric Tillman. You have good speed with Jerry Jeudy. I think you're going to have electricity with Travis Hunter. Jimmy Horn Jr. can just be another pure speed guy.
All right. So we're going to go with Jimmy Horn Jr. Man, Shador's going to be so sad when he doesn't get to play with his buddies. All right. So now we are up to pick 216. We have 2 left. Lance, this is your last pick.
All right. Give me, let's see if Samel Munden from Georgia's left. I'm going to take him. I like his skills, and he fits the scheme.
Let's see.
So yeah, he would be a linebacker.
There he is. You just passed him.
Did I pass him?
Right.
Oh, that's Samuel Brown from Miami.
All right, let me look at our linebackers. Let's see if he's been taken yet. Let me look at our linebackers. All right.
Jim, you took a tackle, right?
Yeah,
we did take a tackle.
7. I swear I'm going to pronounce his name right one of these years. There he is.
There's your guy.
Yeah, 7. I think can play guard. He can play tackle, and there's Samel Munden, former 5-star.
Oh no, and he's a better athlete right now than he is a football player. But I'll tell you what, in terms of, I will go back to what Schwartz does best. He's going to find out what you do best, and he's going to focus on that. And Munden can fly around. And so I got Munden. Yeah, I like that pick.
All right, we're 255. One of your guys, Jalen Travis, still on the board. Lance,
love him.
Tackle. Well, let's take Jalen Travis.
Okay, that's who I took in my last Browns mock too. I took Jalen Travis, and then Lance started texting me about Jalen Travis, and I was like, "All right, I guess I nailed it."
Yes. So 4 new offensive line. So you drafted 2 offensive linemen, and then you got 2 free agents: Cornelius Lucas and Tevin Jenkins. I mean,
right.
You're trying to build an offense that was like rookie Lamar Jackson offense. I mean, adding all these extra offensive linemen is not a bad way to go.
I'm just lingering at the top of the screen here. If you're watching on YouTube, just so Lance can stare at this. It says you drafted Jalen Milroe with a red arrow that it was a bad pick, and then a green arrow right below it, basically saying you should have taken Luther Burden III.
I mean, I don't want to say anything. I'm just to let you. Sometimes you just let it seep in. Just look. Everybody's got eyes.
All right. Travis Hunter, number 2. Jalen Milroe, number 33. Harold Fannin, number 67. Tim, give us the name.
I might have to go to the Dane Brugler guide on this one for the actual pronunciation. So I apologize. But give me a minute. I just got to get to it. I know it's there. Donna Savanaia.
There we go. Lance, you get to give us our number 104 pronunciation.
It's Aluafeme Alajideo.
Well done. I'll do the easy one. Jordan James, number 179. Malachi Moore at 192. Jimmy Horn, 200. Smail Mondin Jr., linebacker, number 216. And then Jalen Travis, number 255. I don't mind this draft. We did pretty well. Again, that Jalen Milrow pick, it's going to be controversial. It's even controversial for me, but I just, again, I already talked about it.
I may have taken a screenshot of the should have taken Luther Burden, just saying.
Hashtag Lance was right in about 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay, before we go, I just want to get into some guys that you're sitting there watching somebody and somebody else stands out to you. I have 3 guys that I have on my list. Let's just kind of lightning round this. Lance, who's a guy moving forward in future drafts that you just noticed while you were sitting here watching?
Well, I'm not going to make you too happy here because I know I've now realized how much you love Jalen Milrow. But my quarterback coming into this draft, so if it was this draft, I loved him. Garrett Nussmeier, I think, is an absolute perfect fit for Kevin Stefanski's play action scheme. Reads well, obviously played in his scheme at LSU. I don't know. I just think he's outstanding in terms of making the throws. Every throw that I've broken down on him is 15 to 25 yards, which I think is so important at the NFL level. He was my guy coming into this. I think if you said to me, as much as I've argued for Shedeur Sanders, it would have been a close call between Shedeur Sanders and Garrett Nussmeier. That's what I think of him. So he was my number 1 guy. Would have been number 2 after Cam Ward just because of athletic ability. But in terms of scheme fit, I would take Garrett Nussmeier over equally to Shedeur Sanders for the Browns.
Yeah, I really like him. He's one of those guys that when you were just watching last year, he really stood out. So I have a quarterback on my list too. Tim and I were talking about him before you came on, Lance. Lenoris Sellers, South Carolina. I really want to see what he can do next year. And he's a guy that would be really, really interesting. I think one of those guys that, Nussmeier is one of these guys, and I think Sellers is one of these guys that we could come out of next college season thinking this is the number 1 quarterback in this class. So I think he's going to be in that discussion. So that's going to be one of my guys, Tim. Who did you have a quarterback at all, Tim, or do you want to go a different direction?
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit off the radar with the quarterback. I'm going to go with Cam Scadaboo's teammate, Sam Levitt.
That's a good one.
A guy that, I think there was so much buzz about Cam Scadaboo, and rightfully so because of how great he was. But Sam Levitt, very solid in his own right. Looking at his numbers, yeah, not a great completion percentage, 61.7, but almost 3,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. So efficiency with a football, mobility with 400 plus yards rushing on 443 rushing yards on the season. Threw for 222, had a pick against Texas, but also 13 carries, 60 yards. Just seems like a real tough guy at quarterback. And I mean tough in a good way, toughness, got some physicality. He might be kind of a sleeper quarterback. Maybe we'll see how he does next year when he doesn't have Cam Scadaboo there. But in what's going to be a much deeper quarterback class, I think, Kate, we're going to be talking about Drew Aller, Kate Klubnik, Lenoris Sellers, Garrett Nussmeier, who, by the way, Lance, good call on him. I remember the Ole Miss game, and he doesn't throw that 4th down touchdown. I believe Aaron Anderson at the end of that game to tie it. We don't have those 2 Jackson Dart missed throws in overtime that could have been interceptions.
Wow, Tim is just throwing it all. He's leaving it all out there now with these quarterbacks.
I absolutely love it. It's fantastic.
Another guy that when I would watch Ole Miss, a guy that stood out to me. So he's listed. He plays linebacker and edge. Santarin Perkins from Ole Miss. I believe he's number 4.
Yep.
You just see that guy making plays. So you're watching their edge rushers. You're watching Walter Nolan. And then you just see Santarin Perkins making plays. And so I think he's going to end up being one of those guys next year that we're talking about as maybe we're talking about him as a 1st-round guy next year. I don't know. It's too early to really say that for sure, but he really stands out when you watch that Ole Miss defense. So I got him on my list.
Dan, what I love about him is his ability to he very little surface area. And next time you watch him, he's impossible to block. He gives you nothing to block. And my dad,
little JOK.
Yeah, my dad used to say, guys who can get skinny are the best. And Perkins is exactly that. He is. You're right. When you watch all those defensive linemen and that good defense, he just for some reason gets skinny, no surface area to block. He's a really good player.
All right, who else do you guys have? I got one more, but who else do you guys have?
I got one is more, and this is more of a sympathy thing. Watching Jalen Milrow, I feel really bad for Ryan Williams. I feel so bad for him because
Jalen Milrow couldn't get him the ball.
No. There's another reason I feel bad for him.
Well done.
Because he happens to be draft eligible the same year as Jeremiah Smith. And there's no universe where anybody's going to be ranked higher than Jeremiah Smith. Jeremiah Smith would be the number one prospect in this draft right now. I mean, the only reason he wouldn't be going number one would be because Tennessee needs a quarterback, and the Browns will just run that card up for Jeremiah Smith were he in this draft. But I feel bad for Ryan Williams because you can't compete with that. But Ryan Williams is close. He would also be a number one receiver in this class. I mean, you watch Jalen Milrow play. There's a reason he's throwing it up to Ryan Williams because the dude is absolute electricity when he gets the football in his hands. I mean, that game-winning touchdown against Georgia, that was one of the games of the year. That is one of the most jaw-dropping plays you're ever going to see because he not only makes an amazing catch, he has to work around two Georgia defenders to score a touchdown in the final 3 minutes of the game. It was absolutely sensational. I remember watching it. It was just one of the most incredible plays. And you see that just absolute electricity with Ryan Williams. I mean, just an absolute special wide receiver. Like, and again, if he were in this class, he would be ahead of Travis Hunter for me as a receiver. He's that good right now. And he's only a true freshman.
Okay, Lance, you got somebody else?
Yeah, I got, I'm going to throw two at you real quick. I'm
Okay.
not going to give you much description. I'm going to give you two guys that physically are just absolute freaks. Anthony Hill, linebacker from Texas. When I'm breaking down the film, he is absolutely unblockable, especially through the playoffs. Then the other guy I really like is Mateo Ungale from Oregon. He is so long and so like every like physical trait that you guys like and that we talk about it, us three in terms of guys who just have that potential. Ungale has all that. He is just outstanding length and violence and ability to extend and hands and play two gap and one gap. Really like both of those guys in term and not so much production yet. Once again, those guys will go on my board once the production comes. But I go with you guys in terms of like, what can they be? Those two are outstanding. And when you watch them on film, you see the movement skills. I love those two.
Also got to shout out Colin Simmons, his edge rusher teammate. I mean, you put him in there with Williams and Smith. That 27 class, like I said, Dylan Raiola, DJ Lagway at quarterback, potentially Arch Manning coming out that year. That could be a generational draft right there already.
The other guy that I just noticed watching him, just every time the ball was in his hands, good things happened. From Clemson, Bryant Wesco Jr. There's a lot of good receivers coming, and he's one of them. He is fun to watch, and Clemson has a couple of good receivers, actually, a couple of good young receivers. So they actually might be interesting this year if they have decent quarterback play, which they didn't really have much of last year. So I really like him, especially just, a potential number one receiver for them. Goes up and gets the football, dynamic, ball in his hands, makes good things happen. I really, really like him.
He's outstanding. I got, two more names I'm throw out there. I can't help myself. My top two backs, Jeremiah Love.
Oh yeah.
And Haynes, who transferred from Alabama to Michigan. And more importantly, Haynes is going to be my number one back on my list because he's now going to be in a scheme that is a gap scheme downhill, and that's what I think he's really good at. So I think Jeremiah Love is going to be an outstanding all-around back. But in terms of the backs that I really like that get me to second five, I think Haynes is going to have a huge year at Michigan.
All right, guys, this was fun. More draft pods in the books. I'm sure I'm going to talk to you guys a bunch here over the next week. Certainly draft weekend. I'm sure that text thread's going to be going all weekend. And then listen, after the draft, maybe we can get together and kind of break down what the Browns did in the draft and kind of go over what we liked and maybe what we didn't like. Lance, we'll see what happens with Jalen Milrow. I will say this: I'm starting to feel like maybe I'm going too all in. Like I don't know what happened, but because I have a lot of reservations about him, and it does feel like one of those things where halfway through the season it's going to be like, oh yeah, that's why. But
just so you know, just because I know I've annoyed you both for 2 years now on, on my guys that I like, Peyton Wilson, Ivan Pace. If Tyler Shuck is good this year, you guys might as well turn your phones off. Just turn your phones off.
Block Lance's number. I'll email you if I need something, Lance.
Right,
Okay.
Just so you know.
That'll do it for this edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. I've mentioned all of our socials just one more time. Our YouTube, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Our Instagram, Orange and Brown Talk. Our Twitter, Orange Brown Talk. And of course, Football Insider. If you want to get subscribed, you get a newsletter. You can become one of our texters. All the subscriber stories on cleveland.com, you get access to those. It's cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page to get info and get signed up for that. And of course, this podcast, for those of you who especially are just watching live on YouTube or just watching on YouTube, go find us on Apple Podcast and Spotify. Tim and Lance, it was great. And I will talk to everyone later.